My name is Ryan, and I used to think marriage was supposed to feel steady, somehow simple. But I swear, one day I woke up next to my wife, Megan, and it felt like she had turned into a walking college lecture. Suddenly our home was not a home. It was a classroom, and I was the villain in whatever lesson she was studying. It really started about 3 months ago. I came home from work, tired but happy to see her, expecting the usual evening together. Instead, Megan looked at me with this serious expression and said, "I have been reading about patriarchal systems in relationships, and we need to talk." Right then, I should have known I was in trouble. She said, "Patriarchal systems," like she had practiced the line in front of a mirror. There was a stack of books on the coffee table with titles I could not begin to pronounce. The woman who once hugged me the second I walked through the door now studied me the way a professor studies a research subject. "All right," I said, placing my keys on the counter. "What is going on?" And then she launched into this long speech, 15 minutes at least. She talked about how traditional marriages supposedly trap women, how intimacy could be used as a tool for male control, and how she was reclaiming her own power. I listened, trying to follow along, wondering when exactly my loving wife had been replaced by some kind of ideological spokesperson. "So what are you actually saying here?" I asked, keeping my voice calm. "I am saying I am done participating in oppressive dynamics," she replied. "Starting with our physical relationship. Let me give you some context. 6 months earlier, Megan had been the one reaching for me more than I reached for her. She complained when I worked overtime because she missed me. Now she was telling me our entire relationship had been part of some grand conspiracy to keep her down. "You are telling me that when we are together, I am oppressing you?" I asked, genuinely trying to understand what she meant. "It is not personal," she said, in the voice people use when they explain basic arithmetic. "It is systemic. Women feeling obligated to be available to men is a pillar of patriarchal control." Something changed inside me at that moment. But it was not shame, and it was not guilt. It was clarity, sharp clarity that the woman standing in front of me had decided to reframe our entire marriage through ideology instead of reality. "When have I ever expected you to be available on demand?" I asked. "Tell me when I ever pressured you or made you feel forced into anything." Instead of answering me, she started quoting statistics about something called coercive consent, and she referenced her new online feminist group like they were the Supreme Court. That is when I understood I was not even talking to my wife anymore. I was talking to whoever she had been listening to for weeks. That night, while she went to bed early, I sat alone in the living room replaying the whole thing in my head. For years of marriage, and suddenly I had become the antagonist in her personal revolution. Not because of anything I did, but because of what she had decided I represented. And it only got worse from there. Every little thing I did was filtered through her new worldview. If I held the door open, she called it benevolent sexism. If I picked up the check at a restaurant, she said it encouraged female dependence. If I told her she looked great, she told me I was objectifying her. This was the same woman who used to light up when I brought her flowers. Now she claimed gifts were transactional power moves. The same woman who used to curl up against me on the couch now sat at the opposite end explaining that casual affection was normalized coercion. I tried to talk to her. I tried to understand where this sudden shift came from. But every conversation ended the same way, with her lecturing me using words that sounded like they came straight out of a university textbook. The last straw happened about 3 weeks ago. I came home after a long day, walked toward her, and reached out for a simple hug. She actually stepped backward and said, "I need you to ask for consent before initiating physical contact." I just stared at her, asked permission to hug my own wife. I said, "It is about respecting boundaries and dismantling patriarchal expectations of access to women's bodies," she replied, as if she memorized the line. That was when it hit me. She was not trying to fix anything. She was tearing our marriage apart in the name of some ideology she barely understood. And I had been standing there letting it happen. "You know what?" I said, stepping back. "You are absolutely right." She looked almost relieved. "I am." "Yes," I told her. "You are 100% right about patriarchal oppression, and I am going to stop oppressing you immediately." She smiled like she had just won a debate tournament. "I am glad you are finally understanding." "Oh, I understand," I said. "From now on, I will not put any patriarchal expectations on you at all. No hugs, no compliments, no affection you did not request. You have opened my eyes." She nodded, still missing the sarcasm completely. "This is real progress," she said. It sure is, I replied. Honestly, after that whole conversation, I decided to give Megan exactly what she claimed she wanted. If my very existence was patriarchal pressure, then fine, I would remove that burden from her life entirely. That night, I moved into the guest room. Not out of anger, not even out of sadness. I was just done being cast as some automatic villain in my own marriage. If she wanted a home free of so-called oppression, I was going to provide one. The next morning, she acted confused when I walked right past her on my way to work without trying to kiss her. Is everything all right? She asked. Everything is perfect, I said. I am simply respecting your boundaries. You have a good day? And that was the beginning of my new plan, giving her a marriage exactly the way she described in theory. She was about to learn that theories and real life do not always match up. Over the next few days, it got educational. Megan went from questioning our intimacy to basically auditing every part of our marriage like she was preparing a research paper. I would be getting ready for work, and she would be standing there, reading from one of her books about how household chores reflect centuries of gender expectations. Never mind that we had always split chores evenly. Never mind that I cooked most of our meals because I actually liked cooking. Now everything was evidence of oppression. One morning at breakfast, she read a passage from one of her books and then announced, "The fact that you handle the finances is a classic example of economic control." I looked up from my coffee. You asked me to take care of the bills. You told me working with numbers stressed you out. That is internalized misogyny, she replied immediately. I was conditioned to believe women are not good with math. So, do you want to manage the budget from now on? I asked. It is not about whether I want to. It is about dismantling patriarchal structures, she said. Great, I replied, pointing to the hallway. The checkbook is in the desk drawer. Have at it. She froze, clearly expecting an argument. Well, I do not have time right now to reorganize our whole financial system. Of course, I said, getting up to leave. But when you are ready to dismantle that particular structure, you just let me know. This became the new pattern. She identified oppression. I agreed and handed her full control. She suddenly had reasons why she did not want the responsibility. When she said that me driving most of the time was reinforcing masculine control of transportation, I tossed her the keys. You drive wherever we go from now on, I told her. Then she remembered she hated driving in heavy traffic. When she claimed that my choosing restaurants was male decision-making privilege, I told her she could pick every restaurant from here on out. But then she got frustrated when I stopped making suggestions. You are being passive-aggressive, she said. No, I told her. I am letting you lead, completely free of my oppressive influence. The next major blow-up came when she started lecturing me about emotional labor. She had joined this online group where women treated every conversation with their husbands like courtroom evidence. She even posted our text messages for strangers to analyze. One night at dinner, she set down her utensils and said, "You asking me about my day is a form of emotional surveillance." I blinked. Asking how your day went is surveillance. It is a method of tracking my emotional state for control. It pretends to be caring, but it is still a patriarchal expectation. So you do not want me to ask about your day anymore? I asked. I want you to understand that women are pressured to share emotional details. It is a gendered burden. Got it, I said. No more questions about your day. She looked at me like I had missed something. That is not what I meant. Then what do you mean? I asked. I mean you need to look at why you think you are entitled to my emotional experience. I leaned back and nodded slowly. You are right. I have been far too entitled to your emotional experience. From now on, I will keep my emotional surveillance to myself. You are being sarcastic, she snapped. No, I said calmly. I am honoring your boundaries. If my interest in your day is oppressive, I will stop being oppressive. Later that night, when she came into the living room and began telling me about something that happened at work, I held up my hand politely. I do not want to participate in emotional surveillance, I said. You should share that with someone who will not use it as a control tactic. She stared at me, stunned. I want to share it with you. I thought sharing emotional experiences was a burden placed unfairly on women, I replied. If it is oppression, then it is oppression. It is, but what? I asked. Either it is oppressive or it is not. You cannot switch the rules depending on the moment. That was the moment it finally clicked for me. Her new ideology was not about equality. It was not about making our marriage stronger. It was about creating a system where she was right no matter what I did, and I was wrong no matter what I did. If I showed care, it was controlling. If I backed off, it was neglectful. There was no winning. There was only me being the bad guy, and she seemed perfectly fine with that. If I acted a little distant, I was accused of ignoring her. If I tried to be romantic, I was told I was objectifying her. If I stopped being romantic, then suddenly I was taking her for granted. No matter what I did, the outcome was already written. The game was fixed, and I was finished playing along. So I changed how I interacted with Megan. I treated our marriage like it was a polite business arrangement. I said please and thank you. I took care of things that needed doing. I kept conversations short and professional. If she wanted to talk, I listened but did not get pulled into debates. Whenever she launched into one of her ideological speeches, I would simply nod and say, "That is an interesting way to look at it," and then I moved on to something else. The shift was small at first, but it changed everything. I stopped trying to meet her emotionally because she had made it clear that any attempt to connect was some sort of power play. I stopped showing affection because she told me physical closeness was coercion. I stopped opening up because she said asking her for emotional honesty was surveillance. So I adapted. I respected her rules. It took less than a week before she started getting irritated. "You are acting strange," she said one evening. "How so?" I asked. "You are different. You feel far away." "I am respecting your boundaries," I replied calmly. "Is that not what you wanted?" "I wanted you to understand the way oppression works in relationships," she said. "I do understand," I told her. "And I changed my behavior to match what you explained. You said intimacy was patriarchal control, so I stopped being intimate. You said emotional sharing was a burden, so I stopped asking about your personal life. You said physical affection was coercive, so I stopped touching you. I am giving you what you asked for." She looked lost, like she could not quite figure out why things were not working out the way she expected. "But now it feels like we are strangers," she said softly. "We are not strangers," I said. "We are two adults in a marriage that you turned into a political debate. I am just following the new rules." "That is not what I meant," she whispered. "Then what did you mean?" I asked. "Because for the last 2 months, you have told me that everything I did as a husband was some version of oppression. So I stopped doing those things. Problem solved." She stared at me for a long time. "You are punishing me." I shook my head. "I am respecting your boundaries. You cannot claim everything I did was oppressive and then get angry when I stopped doing those things. You have to choose. Either you are relieved that I stopped being oppressive, or you are upset because it was never oppression in the first place." For the first time in months, she did not have a ready-made answer from her online feminist classes. She just looked at me, really looked at me, like she suddenly realized I was not playing the part she wanted me to play anymore. I think I need to talk to my group," she said finally. "That sounds perfect," I said. "I am sure they can tell you how my respectful behavior is actually a brand new form of patriarchal cruelty." The expression on her face told me I nailed it. She was already planning to rewrite my behavior into another accusation. But at that point, I did not care. I had reached the point where being the bad guy in her story simply did not bother me anymore. If she wanted to believe she was married to the enemy, then she could live with that fantasy by herself. Her call with her online group lasted 3 full hours. I could hear her voice through the wall while I read in the guest room. They had never met me, but apparently they felt qualified to label my every action as some kind of male wrongdoing. When she finally got off the call, she came straight to me. "We need to discuss what the group helped me realize," she said. "This emotional distance you are creating, it is a punishment. They said it is called stonewalling, and it is a classic form of emotional abuse." I put my book down slowly. "So let me get this straight," I said. "When you pulled away, that was empowerment. When I pull away, it is abuse. Is that what you were saying?" "It is different," she insisted. "How?" I asked. "Because I was setting boundaries based on principle. You are withholding affection to manipulate me." I almost laughed. The boldness of that logic was something to behold. "So you spent 2 months telling me that my affection was oppressive. Now you are angry because I stopped being oppressive?" I asked. "You are twisting my words," she snapped. "No," I said. "I am repeating your exact words. You said physical closeness was patriarchal control. You said emotional sharing was surveillance. You said romantic gestures were manipulative. I listened. I adapted. And now you are calling that abuse." She looked like she was flipping through some mental script, trying to find the next talking point. "The group said that when men withdraw like this, it is usually to punish a woman for asserting her independence," she said. So your group of strangers understands my intentions better than I do? I asked. They have experience with these patterns, she replied. What they have, I said, is a worldview that needs men to be the villains. When I showed affection, I was oppressive. Now that I stopped, I am abusive. There is never a version where I am just a decent husband trying to get through to his wife. I closed my book and looked her straight in the eye. You know what? Your group is right about one thing. I am withdrawing, but it is not to punish you. I am pulling back because you made it clear that my presence is harmful to you. I am doing what you said you wanted. I am giving you space. For the next 2 weeks, I mastered the art of stepping back without disappearing. I stayed polite, but the warmth was gone. I stayed helpful, but not in a caring way. I was around, but I was not truly there. I treated Megan the same way you would treat a roommate who just happened to have the same last name as you. If she made dinner, I thanked her and ate without trying to make conversation. If she asked how my day went, I gave short, plain answers. If she tried to tell me something she saw online or bring up the news, I would nod and say, "That is interesting," then go right back to what I was doing. The change was driving her absolutely insane. But every time she tried to complain, I gently reminded her that I was only following the boundaries she had spent months laying out for me. What could she say to that? She had boxed herself in. The real test came when her birthday got close. Normally, I spent days planning something special for her. I would take the day off work, bring her breakfast in bed, maybe plan a little getaway or a fancy dinner. But all of that had been labeled patriarchal gestures by her. She lectured me so hard about those things that I figured I would honor her new rules. So I did nothing. On the morning of her birthday, I told her happy birthday, and then left for work like it was any other day. No breakfast, no flowers, no wrapped present, no plans, nothing. When she asked if I had something planned, I shook my head and said, I did not want to put any patriarchal pressure on how you celebrate your birthday. She stood there in her pajamas looking completely thrown off. But it is my birthday. Yes, I said, and I am sure you will celebrate in whatever way feels the most genuine to you. I do not want to influence that. I thought maybe we could do something together, she said carefully. That sounds like you want me to plan something romantic, I replied. And you made it pretty clear that romantic gestures count as manipulation. I do not want to oppress you on your birthday. Her expression was priceless. She wanted to argue, but she could not figure out how to criticize me for doing exactly what she had demanded. That night she sat on the couch looking miserable while I read a book in my armchair. After about 20 minutes of silence, she finally spoke. This is not what I wanted. What did you want? I asked, not looking up from the page. I wanted you to understand the issues in our relationship, not to turn into some cold, distant guy. I did not turn into anyone new, I said. I just stopped doing all the things you said were oppressive. You stopped doing everything. Because according to you, I said calmly, everything I did was a problem. You claimed my affection was coercion. My romance was manipulation. My emotional involvement was a control tactic. My interest in your life was surveillance. You declared every single gesture of love to be a weapon. So I put down all the weapons. She sat quietly, chewing on her lip. Maybe I pushed too hard, she whispered. Maybe, I said. You spent 2 months tearing apart our entire marriage and giving speeches about how every single loving thing I ever did was wrong. And now you are surprised I stopped doing those things. I was trying to improve our relationship, she said. I shook my head. No, you were trying to win. You wanted to be right about everything and make me wrong about everything. You wanted me to apologize for being a man who loved his wife. I looked her straight in the eyes. Well, congratulations, I said. You won. I am no longer a man who loves his wife. I am just a man who lives in the same house as you. She stared at me, her face crumpling a little, but I felt absolutely nothing. No anger, no sadness, no pride, just a steady, quiet understanding that she created this mess all on her own. What do you want from me? She finally asked. Nothing. That is the whole point. I stopped wanting anything from you because you told me that my wants were oppressive. So what happens now? She whispered. Now, I said, you live in the world you built. A world where your husband does not smother you with affection or romance. A world where you are completely free from the awful burden of being loved by a man. She looked like she was about to cry, but all I felt was calm. I think I made a mistake, she said quietly. Did you? I asked. Or are you just unhappy with the results of getting everything you asked for? She did not answer. She just stared at me, finally realizing she had turned her husband into someone she did not recognize. Her admitting she made a mistake should have felt like progress. Instead, it started the most irritating phase of the whole thing. Because saying she was wrong did not mean she actually learned anything. Over the next week, she started testing me. Little moves to see if she still had any sway over me. She would brush up against me in the kitchen. She would make soft comments about missing the way things used to be. She would try to start relationship conversations. Every time, I kept my distance. If she brushed against me, I stepped aside politely. If she made some sentimental comment, I nodded and changed the subject. I treated her exactly the way she said she wanted. A husband who did not oppress her with affection. Whenever Megan tried to bring up our relationship, I gently reminded her that I was only honoring the rules she had laid out. One evening, clearly fed up, she said, "You cannot stay like this forever." "Stay like what?" I asked. "Cold. Distant. Like you barely know me anymore." "I am not cold," I told her. "I am being respectful. There is a difference." "This is not respect," she shot back. "This is punishment." I set my coffee down and looked her straight in the eyes. "You want to know what punishment would look like? Punishment would be me doing to you what you spent 2 months doing to me. Punishment would be me taking every single thing you do and filtering it through some ideology that automatically paints you as the bad guy. Punishment would be me lecturing you nonstop about your problematic behavior and demanding you change to fit whatever philosophy I liked that week." I shook my head. "I never did that to you. But you did it to me for 2 months straight." She shifted uncomfortably. "I was trying to grow." "No," I said. "You were trying to win. And you did win. You convinced me that every act of love I ever showed you was some form of oppression. So I stopped showing love. Problem solved." "But I do not want you to stop," she said quietly. "Then you should not have spent months telling me that showing love was wrong." That was the trap she had built for herself. She wanted the old version of me back, but she also wanted to hold on to her ideological victory. She wanted affection again, but she did not want to admit that her entire feminist enlightenment was misguided. She was stuck. She wanted my love while still standing on her moral high horse. Eventually, she tried to blend both worlds. She started speaking to me with her new academic vocabulary, but she expected me to magically interpret her words as normal human affection. One night she said, "I think we should work on rebuilding emotional closeness in a way that respects both of our autonomy." "That sounds like a great personal project for you," I said. "I meant both of us," she replied. "And why would I help rebuild something you spent so much time arguing was harmful?" I asked. "Because I want us to create a healthier dynamic." "The dynamic we have now is very healthy," I said calmly. "You have complete autonomy. I do not expect affection or emotional closeness or anything that might be seen as patriarchal. You are completely free to live your life without interference from me." "That is not what I meant by autonomy." "Then please explain what you meant." She hesitated. "I meant that we should both feel free to express our true selves without judgment." "I am expressing my true self," I said. "My true self learned that showing love to you is considered oppression. So my true self stopped doing it." "You are being difficult on purpose," she said. "No," I said. "I am being consistent. You cannot spend months declaring my behavior to be harmful and then get upset when I change that behavior." We went in circles like that for nearly an hour. She kept trying to keep her ideological stance while also pulling me back into the marriage. But I was done being the villain in her worldview. When she tried to cuddle with me on the couch, I moved to a chair. When she suggested watching a movie together, I told her I had other plans. When she asked if I wanted to go out for dinner, I reminded her that choosing restaurants was male decision-making authority. "You are using my own words against me," she said, frustrated. "I am using the wisdom you taught me," I replied. "Should you not be proud that I have learned so well?" Things finally snapped one night when she tried to initiate intimacy. I was reading in bed when she slid under the blankets next to me wearing the nightgown she knew I always loved. "I miss you," she whispered, scooting closer. I closed my book and looked at her. I thought physical intimacy was patriarchal oppression. "I was wrong about that," she said softly. "Were you actually wrong?" I asked. "Or do you just not like the consequences of the ideology you embraced?" "Does it matter?" "It matters a lot," I said. "Because if you were wrong about this, what else were you wrong about? Were you wrong about emotional sharing being surveillance? Were you wrong about romance being manipulation? Were you wrong about affection being coercive?" She said nothing. You cannot just keep the parts that help you and throw away the parts that hurt you. I continued. Either your analysis of our marriage was correct, and you should be thrilled that I stopped oppressing you, or your analysis was completely wrong, and you owe me an apology for treating me like an enemy for 2 months. I do not owe you anything, she said defensively. You are right, I replied calmly. You do not, and I do not owe you anything, either. I do not owe you affection. I do not owe you romance. I do not owe you emotional closeness or physical intimacy, I said quietly, especially after you spent so much time explaining to me why all of that was harmful. I stood up and walked toward the hallway. Where are you going? Megan asked, her voice shaking. To the guest room, I said. I would not want my patriarchal presence to invade the space where you sleep. I walked out and closed the door gently behind me. As I made my way down the hall, I could hear her crying. For a second, an old part of me, the part that used to drop everything to comfort her, wanted to go back. But that part of me had been beaten out of existence over the last 2 months. She had spent weeks tearing down the man who would have done anything for her. And she succeeded. What was left now was someone who had learned the only way to survive was to stop playing her game entirely. Her crying went on for an hour. Then silence. Around 2 in the morning, there was a soft knock on the guest room door. Can we talk? She asked. I opened the door. She stood there in her pajamas, eyes swollen and red like she had survived a storm. I need to tell you something, she whispered. Go ahead. I hate what I have turned into. I hate what I did to us. I hate that I took the best parts of our marriage and twisted them into problems I needed to fix. I waited. My group made everything sound so reasonable, she continued. They had explanations for every little thing in our relationship. And every explanation made you the villain. It felt powerful to have this tidy framework that told me why I sometimes felt bored or restless. But I think I was just looking for someone to blame. Blame for what? I asked. For being bored. For feeling like I was not growing. For wondering if there was something more exciting out there than our normal life. Finally, she was being honest. So instead of telling me you were restless, I said, you decided the problem was patriarchal oppression? It felt easier to blame the system than admit I was being ungrateful, she said. But now I realize that destroying something good does not make you enlightened. It just makes you the person who destroyed something good. She looked up at me, hoping that her confession would magically undo everything. I appreciate you telling me that, I said. But appreciating something is not the same as trusting someone. What would it take for you to trust me again? She asked. I honestly do not know if that is even possible. Why? She whispered. You did not just disagree with me, I said. You rewrote our entire marriage into a story where I was an oppressor and you were a victim. You convinced yourself that my love was abuse. How am I supposed to trust someone who can take 4 years of marriage and flip it into something ugly? I was confused, she said. No, you were cruel. And not just to me. You were cruel to yourself, too. You took a husband who adored you and reshaped him into someone who sees you like a stranger. I know, she whispered. Do you? I asked. Because even now, you are not actually apologizing. You are explaining. You are asking for understanding instead of taking responsibility. She went quiet. You are right, she finally said. I am sorry. I am sorry for treating you like an enemy. I am sorry for making you feel unwanted. I am sorry for choosing ideology over my own husband. Thank you, I said. But apologies do not erase damage. They simply admit it happened. So what happens now? She asked softly. I looked at her standing in the hallway. The same woman I had built a life with. The same woman who had spent months dismantling everything we built. Now, I said, you have to decide what you truly want. Do you want a husband who loves you? Or do you want to live in a world where being loved is considered oppression? You cannot have both. I want my husband back, she said. He is gone, I answered. You buried him under your theories and your online group. What is left is a man who learned that loving you is dangerous. That is not fair, she said, tears returning. Fair? I asked. You spent 2 months telling me everything I did was wrong. Now that I finally learned the lesson you taught, you want to pretend the class never happened? She started crying again, but this time, it was not dramatic or manipulative. It was real. She looked completely broken. I do not know how to fix this, she said. Maybe you cannot, I told her. Maybe some things break and stay broken. Maybe this is the price for choosing ideology over happiness. I turned toward the guest room, but she grabbed my arm. Wait, she said. What if I threw out the books? What if I left the group? What if I never talked about patriarchy again? I paused. If you did that, I said, you would just be someone who abandons her beliefs the moment they become inconvenient. That is not better. That is just different. She looked lost. Then what do you want from me? I want you to mean it when you apologize. I want you to understand that love is not oppression, even when it is imperfect. And I want you to choose our marriage because you believe in it, not because you miss the perks of being loved. I do believe it, she said. We will see, I replied. I closed the door gently, leaving her in the hallway with the mess she had created. For the first time, she seemed to understand that getting exactly what you say you want does not always feel as good as you think. The next morning, I woke up to the smell of coffee and an actual breakfast cooking, not the usual rushed routine we had fallen into. When I walked into the kitchen, Megan was standing at the stove, dressed, hair done, making pancakes. Good morning, she said softly. Morning, I answered. I made breakfast. I thought maybe we could sit down and eat together like we used to. Like we used to before sitting down together became a patriarchal dinner table dynamic? I asked. She winced. I deserve that. Over the next week, she tried everything. She tossed out the books. She left the online groups. She stopped using ideological vocabulary to analyze our marriage. She tried to talk to me the way she used to. She tried laughing with me again. She tried rebuilding connection brick by brick. But she did not understand something important. Trust does not rebuild just because someone behaves differently. Trust rebuilds over time, and time does not go backward. I watched her efforts the same way someone watches a science experiment. She was performing the part of a loving wife, but performance is not the same thing as real change. She was doing the right actions, but the reasons behind them did not feel solid. One night she announced, I deleted everything. All the groups. All the contacts. All the saved articles. I am done with all of it. Why? I asked. Because I want to save our marriage. That is not a reason, I said. That is a goal. Why do you want to save our marriage? She froze, clearly not expecting the question. Because I love you, she finally said. Do you? I asked. Or do you love the idea of being married? Do you love me? Or do you love the comfort and stability I give you? I love you, she repeated. Then why did you spend 2 months convincing yourself that my love was harmful? Because I was wrong, she said. About what? I asked. She struggled. About everything. That is not enough, I said. If you cannot explain what you were wrong about, then you do not actually understand what went wrong. This was the real test, not whether she could say she was sorry, but whether she understood the damage she caused. I was wrong to call your affection oppressive, she said finally. I was wrong to call romance manipulation. I was wrong for treating our marriage like a power struggle instead of a partnership. And I was wrong for putting ideology above you above us. Good, I said. Now tell me this. How do I know you will not do it again? Because I learned my lesson. Did you learn it? I asked. Or did you just hate the consequences? She was silent for a long time. What do you want me to say? She asked. I want you to understand that the problem was not the feminism, I said. The real problem was that you were willing to throw away our whole marriage for any idea that made you feel morally superior. That is not fair, she said quietly. Isn't it? I replied. You took 4 years of loving memories and interpreted them as oppression because a group of strangers told you that was the enlightened way. You wanted their approval more than you wanted our marriage. She had no answer. Here is what happens now, I said. You are going to have to prove you have changed. Not with words, with time. And while you do that, you need to understand something. I may never trust you fully again. How long will that take? She asked, almost whispering. As long as it takes, I said. Maybe months. Maybe years. Maybe forever. That is not fair either, she said. You are right, I told her. It is not fair. It is not fair that I have to rebuild trust in my own wife. It is not fair that I have to wonder if you will wake up one morning and decide that our marriage is problematic again. It is not fair that I have to choose between loving you and protecting myself from you. She started crying again, and the worst part was I felt nothing. The instinct to comfort her was gone. She had killed that instinct slowly, one ideological lecture at a time. I just want things to go back to normal, she whispered. Normal is dead, I said. You made sure of that. We can build something new, but it will never be the same as before. What if I cannot prove myself to you? She asked. Then you will live with the consequences of your choices, I said. And if I can? She asked. Then maybe we will have a marriage worth saving. She looked across the table at me. The woman who had been my partner, my best friend, my lover, and then my enemy, all within a few months. I am going to try, she said. Good, I replied, because I am done trying. I am done being the only one fighting for us. I am done covering for behavior that almost burned down everything I cared about. From now on, you prove yourself to me, not the other way around. I stood up. Where are you going? She asked. To live my life, I said. With or without you. That is your choice to make. And for the first time in months, I felt like myself again. Not the villain she made me out to be, not the doormat I almost became, but a man who finally remembered his value. Whether she rose to meet that standard was her problem now. I was done lowering myself to fit inside her confusion.